Welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is your host Cyrus, once again talking about complex supernatural metaphysical subjects. And tonight I want to talk about the basic tactic that I have seen in the last 15, 16, 17 years involved in this area, and how paranormal skeptics, who are, I would call, agenda driven, operate. So you can use this as a guide for dealing with people when they are operating from this mindset. And I don't necessarily think it's a good idea to spend all your time trying to make people who disagree with you philosophically to see the light. But sometimes things will happen where these people will come after you, and then you need to know how they operate so that you can punch back. So I am a big proponent of punching back when somebody is trying to throw a punch at you. So this can happen sometimes quite maliciously because, since I became an author, since writing my books and doing conferences and things like this, I've talked to many people, and I've heard some stories that still frankly piss me off. Like somebody has a near-death experience, and then they have a family member interrogate them at a family function or dinner. It's like, so Sally, I saw on Facebook this experience you had. And then they start just laying into them because they are agenda-driven. They're an agenda-driven skeptic who thinks it's fun or it's noble to attack people who have had supernatural experiences, who don't live in the little bubble that they live in. So I think it's valuable to be prepared and know how to deal with these people, and also just to see how they operate in general. We still see huge backlash in facets of mainstream population to attack concepts like psychics, mediumship, paranormal abilities, after-death contact, astral projection, and all of it is misinformed. All of it is without knowledge, education about scientific guidelines. All of it is just based upon an agenda-driven narrative where they believe it's socially acceptable to go after people who believe in or practice these topics, often because they have this skewed idealism that they think because all psychics and all mediums are fakes, all of them, and they're all after your money, and they're all preying on grieving people, it gives them the moral authority to be able to attack them anytime, any place, anyhow. And this extends to other subjects, even if they're only superficially related to psychics or mediums. So somebody has a near-death experience. Hey, this is part of the woo cult, so we can go after this person. I don't think the people who think this way are a majority of the population, but I do think that they're a large part. If you look at sort of like major polling groups that survey people about belief in like life after death, it's always the majority who believes in topics like life after death. It's usually something like the 60 to 70+% margin. It might even be higher in the USA. I'd have to look at like the Gallup statistics to find out about that. But from what I've read, like from some of Victor's reports about that, it seems really in favor of quote woo. So it's really just this subset of the population who are like this. But again, we have to understand how they operate. Before I talk about this expertly made little graph here, no, I'm not a graphic design artist by trade, as you can tell. I do want to suggest to please help this channel out if you agree with the stuff I'm talking about by hitting that subscribe button down below if you have not done so yet, punching that like button, hitting that share button, punching that blue notification bell. This channel is kind of teetering between like failing and succeeding, so it's teetering back and forth. And if I don't keep getting subscribes and activity on the channel, I mean, it might fall off. So I need help with that. Okay, so let's look at the little graphic I made. So this is the very simple process that you'll see with agenda-driven skeptics. So again, I wouldn't say a closed-minded skeptic is an agenda-driven skeptic. A closed-minded skeptic just refuses to acknowledge something and has no interest in ever looking at the evidence. And that's fine, because most closed-minded skeptics, they don't think about these subjects, if you bring it up, they will change the topic, and they're not interested in trying to proselytize and change people to their way of thinking. That's just, it's their opinion. If when I meet people like this, I can sniff it out well in advance, and I will never tell them, what I do, my books, and then if they do find out, most of the time, an honest, closed-minded skeptic will be like, oh, that's interesting, and that's not really my cup of tea, but okay, cool. And that's fine. So I have friends like that. One of my best friends is like that, and he's inquired before why I don't talk about some of the work that I do, and I'm just like, dude, if I told you the stuff that I was into, the books I write, what they're about, you would have no interest in it. You wouldn't even want to hear about it. And he says, fair enough. So, that's kind of how it is, and then someday they get curious, they may begin asking questions, but whatever. So that's a closed-minded skeptic. An agenda-driven skeptic becomes this kind of like secular or atheist social justice warrior who has to go out and attack, with a sword, the people who don't belong to materialist mainstream orthodoxy. It's funny, what a brave position that is, to defend the status quo, to defend materialism, to defend academia, to defend the predominant institutional power. So, it's kind of funny, isn't it? Like, it's not exactly the Rebel Alliance from Star Wars, is it? It's a little bit more imperial, wouldn't you say? Defend the powers that be. That's what these people do. So when you're dealing with an agenda-driven person, and I think that this can relate to the paranormal, but it'll also relate to many other subjects, this is my realization that I've been thinking about for a long time. I'm putting it out there. So it's this very simple behavioral pattern. The first step is to cast a shadow. So when you read an anti-paranormal hit piece, one of the posters on Afterlife Topics brought to my attention is hit piece by John Oliver, the leftist HBO guy who used to be on The Daily Show, who I used to watch but then found him increasingly unfunny, and then I never watched him again. He recently did a hit piece attacking psychics and mediums. It is a highly influential show. I'm sure it's going to result in an increase in the recruitment drive, I guess, of agenda-driven skeptics. So be prepared for people who are of the, I guess, persuasion, philosophical persuasion, who watched John Oliver to now be going out and continuing to smear these subjects. So get ready for that. So there was that hit piece. There was many examples of everything that the professional skeptics stand behind, the James Randi cult that still exists. I call them all anti-paranormalists, the witch hunters. So anything that's anomalous, they will attack. They believe that they're the beacons of rationality. They don't realize that they themselves they operate like a cult. So what these people do is, the step one is they cast a shadow. So they will, as an example, let's take something very generalized, psychic powers. This can mean so many things. Dean Radin's research, it can mean precognitive studies, it can mean the CIA-backed remote viewing studies, the private corporate remote viewing studies, intuitive powers, premonitions, telepathic links between people. Those are just the ideas that come to my mind. So many subjects. It's very generalized. Now let's say you get an agenda-driven skeptic and he or she wants to discredit that. The first step is to cast a shadow. To cast a shadow, you find an example that makes it look bad. You say, isn't it funny how psychics can never demonstrate their abilities in front of a camera? Here's a link to Uri Geller in the 1980s making a fool of himself on The Tonight Show. Something like that. So they will construct this argument, and it will be made of I would say it shall be a paper thin argument. I'm finding an example to illustrate. As thin as this bag. So Looks like a big argument, looks impressive on the outside, but really it's a paper thin, has no substance because it's using just one example to cast a doubt on the entire subject. So let's find another example of where psychic abilities didn't pan out. So a philosophical argument, why haven't psychics won the lottery? Easy response is, how do you know that they haven't won lotteries? Do you really think somebody who won the lottery is going to announce that they won it because they have a psychic ability? Regardless, you can take that as a philosophical point and then generalize. So you cast, well, actually that's the next step. So first you cast a shadow. So you present that one circumstance, that one thing that makes the subject look bad. Then the second step is you generalize the entire subject. So for example, why are psychics unable to perform on camera? Look at this clip from Uri Geller many years ago, who, by the way, there is actual evidence that Uri Geller is a legitimate psychic, even if he was fudging things back in the day to get publicity. So show some clip. Maybe show an old clip of James Randi showing how to bend spoons. So cast a shadow and then say, as you can see, this is usually usually like the preface that you might hear before they begin the generalization process. As you can see, psychics have never been able to demonstrate their abilities, and when they do, or when they try to, they get caught out, period. So now they've just constructed the argument, which will give lots of applause and accolades by all their peers, but obviously it's a very hollow argument. But now they have cast a shadow on an entire subject, and then they've use that shadow to sweep it across all of it. So let's try a different example. Near-death experiences, highly relevant, highly investigated by very qualified people like Michael Sabom and Kenneth Ring and of course Sam Parnia. Highly verifiable and highly investigated. So what do? How do you, as an agenda-driven skeptic, attack near-death experiences? Well, step one, cast a shadow. Find a study, even if it's been disproven, that shows or that indicated near-death experiences were physiological. Say, as you can see, the tunnel in the light is likely caused by the lights of the operating room above you. So this was something that Neil deGrasse Tyson said recently, attempting to explain the near-death experience. So funny because the experiences with the light are like unbelievably transcendental and include things that are just beyond comprehension, and yet they can attribute it to like looking at the light on a ceiling. As you can see, all near-death experiences are related to they say, as you can see, near-death experiences, the light in tunnel is easily explained by just the light above the operating table. It's further cast a shadow by then saying near-death experiences were heavily discredited by the researcher Susan Blackmore in the 90s, who wrote the book Dying to Live, as also related to oxygen deprivation. And finally, as we can see, near-death experiences often involve a reconfirmation of personal beliefs and biases. For example, a look at heaven is for real, which seemed to just be a bunch of Christian drivel that the parents coaxed the kid into talking about. So near-death experiences conveniently match up to people's belief systems. As we can see, now we go into the generalization part. As we can see, people who have near-death experiences are merely, that's a great word to use, merely fabricating information to confirm their own beliefs, or they want desperately to believe in something, and so that's why they'll say that the operating room light on the ceiling was the tunnel and light, and the rest of it is just either fabricated or delusional. So there you go. They cast a shadow by using some very cherry-picked examples. Then they generalize to smear the whole subject. The final step is repeat. Somebody comes at you with a counter argument, just go in a circle again and find a different way to repeat the process all over again. So there was a study that indicated with like mice releasing DMT when they die. And so somehow this relates to possible transcendental effects, which this study was later disproven, by the way. Cite that. So as you can see, people who have DMT experiences think that they're leaving their bodies. As we can see, all near-death experiences are just caused by little bits of DMT released in the brain. And then somebody challenges that, it's okay, repeat, do this process all over again. So that is the circular pattern of how they operate. And the best way to fight this, the best way to combat this is to stop them. So keep presenting different types of information, different types of rebuttals until they can't keep doing this cycle. And it sounds like tedious work, and it is tedious work, but you pretty much have to fight fire with fire. So there are studies of near-death experiences that show perception among blind people. There's studies of near-death experiences that show people meeting deceased loved ones who they were not aware of were dead until they had the near-death experience. There's studies that show near-death experiencers are able to see things out of their bodies that were able to be verified. There was even a case like this in the AWARE study where somebody was able to identify details in an operating room, and this was under scientific scrutiny with the Samparnia. It wasn't the numbers they wanted somebody to identify, but they could see other things in the operating room, and they were able to verify this through the research team. So you can go down the list. There's a lot of counter punches, and you can just keep counter punching. It's kind of like boxing. What will happen is the agenda-driven skeptic will wear out and usually concede and say something like, no amount of your arguments are going to convince me otherwise. I can tell it's all bunk. And then you can say, well, I've just presented innumerable ways to show how you're wrong. And if you have nothing else to say, then I'll let the audience decide, whoever is listening to the debate, because that's really what matters. It's not about, they don't care about convincing you. They want to proselytize to all the people listening and watching. And you have to fight fire with fire. It's also your job to convince the jury. So it's a little courtroom battle. And at the end of the day, the agenda-driven skeptic is not going to change their mind. But the people watching, people who are smart, they'll know when a debate is won. And they're less likely to become agenda-driven skeptics themselves because they just saw somebody really on fire and performing a legitimate job of defending the topic. So one last thing I'll show, and I've shown this in prior videos because it is on the Afterlife Topics website. So let's go over to afterlifetopics.com. That's the website for this channel and the group and my books. In case you haven't been there yet, there's some resources on here. There's a bunch of articles, stuff like that. Old promo for my book that came out last year, The Afterlife and Beyond. As you can see, these are some of my books right here. Understanding Life After Death, The Afterlife and Beyond. Up here you can click Debunker Arguments Destroyed on this page. So here we can find many peer-reviewed scientific research papers, and most of them are positive in relation to the subject, from straight up life after death, survival of consciousness, to telepathy and ESP, mind over matter, and lots of books. And these are many research papers, and so when they generalize and say there's never been any evidence of a paranormal subject or life after death, there's never been a scientific study. When you see these statements made out of ignorance, grab your smartphone, head to afterlifetopics.com, start pulling up some of these papers, some of these studies, and start firing those back, and then see how it goes. Well, that's it for this video. Hopefully that helps shed some light on the psychology of these types of debates. If you like this stuff, you can get involved here on this website. So again, these are the books, Afterlife and Beyond, Understanding Life After Death. Then here is, of course, the YouTube page you're on right now. You can watch many more videos that I've put out there. The little mailing list you can join right here, full name and email address, you can put that in. It's not too active at this time. I think it will be more active in the future. Of course, we have Afterlife University. This is the way for people who want to support the work and pay some money every month. You need to get access to lots of classes and cool stuff like that. So that's Afterlife University. Like really, it's like if you want to help somebody out like me who's just like, trying to keep going with all this work, and you want to throw a few dollars in every month and enroll in the classes and be part of a close-knit community with lots of discussions twice a week, then that's something to check out. And we have the Facebook groups as well. Have some primer posts about like what is the afterlife, a little summary article about my points of view for my books and things like that. That's a nice one to show people who are trying to figure this stuff out. All right, well that's it. Hopefully this helped. I'll catch you guys on the next video.